Um, Pete Seeger was a seminal figure in the folk music scene. People that have followed his career or listened to him probably know of his work with the Almanac Singers, the Weavers, a lot of his solo work in recordings and performing. He was a social activist, whether it was political, civil rights, or environmental, and of course, he's quite well known for his environmental work on the Hudson. This evening, for the presentation, we have Professor Allan Winkler, who was a history professor at Miami University in Ohio. He wrote a book a number of years ago called To Everything There Is a Season, Pete Seeger and the Power of Song. I guess Allan will probably have us singing some songs tonight, which I hope people will enjoy doing. So please give a warm welcome to our featured guest this evening, Professor Allan Winkler.
First, let me say that I am delighted to be here. As some of you know, I grew up just 20 miles up the road in Highland Park, and so came down to Princeton regularly, McCarter Theater and everything else, and it's really a pleasure to be back, and thank you for having me. This story begins in the summer of 1962. I had just graduated from high school. My father, who taught at Rutgers, was teaching for the summer, teaching high school teachers in Williamstown, Massachusetts, in a program. And I drove up to see them in the summer with my cousin Jeff, who was a banjo player from Oberlin College. We got to Williamstown, and my mother said, "We were going to have dinner, but we've been invited out, but I've got something even better for you. I've got 2 tickets to a Pete Seeger concert." And I didn't know who Pete Seeger was. But my cousin said, "You're going to like this." And we went to the Music Barn in Lenox, Massachusetts, and I was absolutely entranced. People sang along. Pete was wonderful. Came back humming. When I got to college, I went to the listening lab and found a Pete Seeger record, which I played over and over and over. And over the years, I became even fonder of the music. This was the period of the folk music revival. I listened to other people and the like. And slowly, as my own professional career developed, I was writing books about World War II and biographies of people like FDR. But what I really wanted to do was to write a biography of Pete Seeger. And 2 friends of mine from graduate school were editing a new series for the Oxford University Press. We talked about it, and they said, "We want a book about music." And I said, "I want to write a book about Pete Seeger," and that was that. And so I did. After doing research for, a couple of months, perhaps a couple of years, I made contact with Pete, and I went up to Beacon, New York to interview him. I debated in my own mind whether I should bring my guitar. It sounded hokey, and my guitar teacher said, "If you don't, you'll regret it all your life." So I brought it. Pete met me at the train, took the guitar without saying a word, plunked it in the middle of his living room in Beacon, New York. We talked for the next 3 hours on tape, prelude to what I wanted to do about interviewing him for the book. And when it was over, he said, "Would you like a bite of lunch?" And I said, "Well, could you do me a favor first?" And I pointed to the banjo on the wall that said, "This machine surrounds hate and forces it to surrender. Would you play that thing for me?" And he looked at me and he said, "Only if you'll play with me." And that was that. We played 4 or 5 songs that day. I continued going back. I probably went up to Beacon about 30 times. Every time I brought my guitar, every time we played music together, and it was just a real treat. On one occasion, as the book was about to come out, I had a young colleague with whom I played music, and there was a very good 20th century historian from Cornell named Richard Polenberg, who was also a banjo player. And I arranged with Pete's wife, Toshi, that we could all go up there with our spouses and play music. And we did. 2.5 hours sitting in front of a fire, watching the Hudson River, playing music together. 2 banjos, 2 guitars. It doesn't get any better than that. Well, what I want to do tonight, is to talk about Pete's life, my connections with him. I'd like us to sing 14 or 15 songs together, most of which you know. A few will be new. One of the things that Pete told me and has written about was that he always felt that he was part of a long chain to get people singing, to bring songs back and to make them public and to have people enjoy the music. And I began to feel that perhaps I was a part of that chain too. And so tonight, anytime we're singing, please join. I would really appreciate your doing that, and we'll go on from there. Pete was born in 1919. His father was a pianist who was also a musicologist. He was the youngest department head at Berkeley when Pete was born. His mother was a concert violinist, very good. She wanted him, Pete, to take lessons in music. Charles Seeger, Pete's father, said, just leave instruments around the house and Pete will pick up whatever he wants, and ultimately that's exactly what happened. It was a kind of lonely childhood. His parents divorced when he was quite young. They lived on either side of Central Park in New York City. His father was fired from Berkeley for his radical activities during World War I and thereafter. He was sympathetic with the IWW, the Wobblies, and the like. He had a fairly lonely childhood, was sent off to boarding school when he was, probably 11 or 12. Eventually, he went to Harvard, as many members of his family did. He was part of the class of 1942, where John Kennedy was a student at that time, too. In his sophomore year, he was kind of disgusted by what was going on. He was more and more active himself in the Young Communist League. And he went to a sociology professor, and he said, "Why are you using all this highfalutin language?" And the professor said, "Well, it makes me sound more important." And Pete said, "I'm out of here." And he quit school and never went back. He spent the next summer painting farmhouses, trying to get a little money. It didn't work. He joined a puppet troupe, which also sang. That didn't work. And then a man about his age named Allan Lomax, whose father, John Lomax, was collecting all kinds of songs, particularly in the Deep South. And Allan was now head of a kind of folk song archive at the Library of Congress. And he invited Pete to join him. And Pete began to transcribe music that had been recorded. He learned a good deal about folk music. This is the age before computers and the like, so he would play things very slowly on a turntable and then stop it so he could figure out what was going on. That was fine. It gave Pete money for a living. But the more important thing was, in 1940, there was a benefit at the Forest Theater on Broadway for striking farm workers, people that John Steinbeck had written about in The Grapes of Wrath. And Pete was asked to play one song. He waited around for hours at the Forest Theater until it was his turn. He came up and he played abysmally. He said he forgot lyrics, he fumbled chords, he was embarrassed in the extreme. But it was not a total disaster, because that was the evening that he met Woody Guthrie, 7 years older than he. And Woody liked him and invited him to go out west with him, and Pete did. And they rode the railroad trains, they jumped on freight trains, they went into bars and sang for meals and the like, and it was really quite an experience for Pete. During that time, they wrote a song called Union Made. Woody says they wrote it together. Pete had it copyrighted in Woody's name because he said he had not done anything at all on that. There once was a Union maid who never was afraid of goons and ginks and company finks and so forth. But they did write a song together that was really Pete's first ever song. and it was called 66 Highway Blues. And I'm going to sing that for you. The first line is, there is a highway from coast to coast, New York to Los Angeles, New York to Los Angeles. That's not true. In fact, Route 66 begins in Chicago. And my son David is going to ride his motorcycle from Chicago all the way to LA on Route 66 next week. But in any event, this was Pete's first song. It's probably something you haven't heard. It's not one of his most memorable, but a couple of verses. There is a highway from coast to coast, New York to Los Angeles. I'm going down the road with trouble in my mind, got them 66 highway blues. I'm gonna start me a hungry man's union, ain't gonna charge no dues. Gonna march down that road to the Wall Street wall, singing them 66 highway blues. Well, the first song, but there would be others. Pete came back to New York, got active, as Pete said, with a group called the Almanac Singers. It was a ramshackle group, included a variety of people, Woody Guthrie among them. It was a group that Woody once said was the only group that rehearsed on stage. They didn't do much else. And they sang labor songs, they sang anti-war songs until the United States got into World War II. Around about this time, Pete married Toshi Oda. Then he went into the military, where he served in Saipan for the duration of the war, and then he came home. He wanted to start something that he called people's songs. He wanted people to have access to music, folk music, and he dedicated his life to doing that, all the while becoming ever more active in the American labor movement. In 1935, Franklin Roosevelt had pushed through the Wagner Act, the National Labor Relations Act, that gave unions the right to organize and bargain collectively. And Pete and the rest of his cohort, people singing in hootenannies and the like, were very much a part of that. In 1948, for example, he and others of his group supported Henry Wallace in the presidential election. Wallace, far more radical than Harry Truman, and they sang a whole range of songs. The best known of those was one that had been written in 1915 for the Wobblies, the IWW, and you know it. Please join me. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. One more time. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. Well, eventually people's songs folded. Pete began to sing with another group, and this was the one that called itself the Weavers. He hooked up with somebody named Lee Hayes, whose father had been a minister from down south, and then Ronnie Gilbert and Fred Hellerman joined them. Pete and Lee Hayes together wrote a song in 1950 that was in the very first issue of the magazine Sing Out. It was a song, If I Had a Hammer. They wrote that together. It was, as Pete said, a collector's item, which meant that only a collector would ever have heard of it. Then in the early 1960s, Peter, Paul, and Mary recorded it on their very first album, and it became, obviously, a worldwide hit. If I Had a Hammer. had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between brothers and my sisters all over this land. If I had a bell, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between brothers and my sisters all over this land. If I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between brothers and my sisters all over this land. Well, I've got a hammer and I've got a bell, I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about love between brothers and my sisters all over this land. Great song. Well, in 1950, the Weavers also recorded a song written by the great Hughie Leadbelly, and that song became the best-selling song in America. Weavers were on the front covers of various magazines, but Irene Goodnight was a huge, huge success. Let's do a few verses of that. We'll start with the chorus. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams. Last Saturday night I got married. Me and my wife settled down. Now me and my wife, we are parted. Gonna take another walk downtown. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams. Here comes my favorite verse. Sometimes I live in the country, sometimes I live in town, sometimes I take a great notion to jump in the river and drown. One more chorus. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams. Yeah. Well, Pete's radical activities caught up with him. This was, of course, the 1950s. Cold War was in full swing. And the House Un-American Activities Committee began inviting people, inviting is not the right word, demanding that people come and testify. Lee Hayes came and he pleaded the Fifth Amendment. Pete was asked to come and refused to use the Fifth Amendment, pleaded the First Amendment, his right to free speech, but the House committee didn't like that. Eventually, Pete was charged with contempt of Congress, indicted, tried in the early 60s, convicted, and finally his conviction was overthrown on a technicality and he was home free. But during that time, nobody would hire the Weavers, despite a reunion concert at Carnegie Hall, and Pete was left without a livelihood. And at that point, he began to travel around the country, singing to groups like this one, singing to high schools and summer camps and the like, and developed a following, but he was also out of the house about 270 days a year, which was not easy for either him or for Toshi or the young children they now had. But during that time, at one point, he was on his way to Oberlin College in Ohio near Cleveland. He was riding the plane and reading a Russian novel called And Quiet Flows the Don. And he came across some passages in that he liked. And he wrote a chorus, very simple chorus, taped the words and music to the pole mic right in front of him, and sang at Earlham the song that was Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Joe Hickerson, they later wrote a number of other verses, but it's still, I think, one of Pete's loveliest songs. Where have all the flowers gone? Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Gone to young girls, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young girls gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young girls gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young girls gone? Gone to soldiers, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone? Gone to graveyards, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time passing. Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago. Where have all the graveyards gone? Gone to flowers, everyone. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? Thank you. Well, around about this time, Pete read in the newspapers about the Montgomery bus boycott, where Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus, followed what Martin Luther King was doing at that time, and became active in the movement. Went down south to listen to the music and see if he could sing and participate in it. Actually took Bob Dylan with him, his first trip down the south, and Dylan, who later broke, of course, called Pete a living saint. And he really got caught up in the music. And I had learned that one of the songs that Pete really, really liked was an old spiritual. And I asked him if he would sing it with me the very first time I was up there. It's called "Oh Mary, Don't You Weep." If I could, I surely would stand on the rock where Moses stood. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Mary wore 3 links of chain. On every link was freedom's name, 'cause Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Here's a verse by Lead Belly. Moses went to the Red Sea shore, smoting the water with a 2x4, 'cause Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water but the fire next time. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. One more chorus. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Another song that Pete sang pretty regularly was something that I do remember from the 60s, holding a candle up and singing along. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Deep down in the South, I'm gonna let it shine. Deep down in the South, I'm gonna let it shine. Deep down in the South, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. We got the light of freedom, we're gonna let it shine. We got the light of freedom, we're gonna let it shine. We got the light of freedom, we're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. We're gonna take a short break after the next song, but that's the most important one of the civil rights movement. Way back in 1901, a black minister named Charles Tindley wrote a song that was called "I'll Overcome Someday," and striking tobacco workers in around 1935 sang it in Charleston, South Carolina. And a woman named Zilphia Horton, whose husband Miles Horton, with Zilphia, had founded the Highlander Folk School, teaching people radical activism and the like. Rosa Parks had gone there before she refused to go to the back of the bus in Montgomery. Zilphia heard that song and taught it to Pete when she was in New York on a fundraising trip in about 1947 or so. And Pete was really taken by it. And as he listened to it, he set it to music, his own. He also changed the first line. Instead of "I will overcome," he made it "We shall overcome." Toshi, his wife, said that was his Harvard grammar coming into play. But Pete claimed he liked it because mouth was more open with "we" rather than "I." In any event, he began singing it. Graduate student named Frank Hamilton heard it, And then Frank Hamilton taught it to another graduate student in California named Guy Carawan. Zilphia had died, and Guy had come to Highlander and was teaching volunteers music that they could sing. This is in 1960, as they were becoming active in the civil rights movement. And Guy invited Pete to come join him in that session, and they taught the volunteers this song, which they really, really liked. And a couple weeks later, Ella Baker and others helped form the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and again they began singing this song, and it became the marching song of the movement. So we'll take a break after We Shall Overcome. We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday, for deep in my heart I do believe we shall overcome someday. We are not afraid, we are not afraid, we are not afraid someday, for deep in my heart I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand, we'll walk hand in hand, we'll walk hand in hand someday, for deep in my heart I do believe we shall overcome someday. Let's take about a 15-minute break and then we'll be back.
Please welcome back Professor Allan Winkler.
As Peter said, I did not bring copies of my book to sell to you. I should have. It lists for about $25 on Amazon, but I've been talking to the people at the front desk, and I will sell it to you for $10, but you need to give them the $10 and your address, and I will mail to them whatever packet, if any, people would like, and I'm happy to do that, just because I'm happy to get it out there to you. So if you wish, and I want to start by just thanking you for singing so wonderfully. This is really, really great. Towards the end of the civil rights era, things changed. This was the time when Black Power became much more important, Stokely Carmichael, and Pete recognized that there wasn't really a place for him any longer. And it didn't matter because at that time, the war in Vietnam was escalating out of control. And Pete became extremely active in this effort to stop the war. This is in mid to later 60s. One of the songs that he sang all the time, and I know this for a fact, was Down by the Riverside. When the Iraq War began, my wife and I called Pete and asked if we could come and visit him. And he said, sure, as long as you go to the peace demonstration with me. We ended up somewhere near Beacon at the intersection of two state highways, and we held out signs that said, stop and honk if you want peace. Across the street there were people who said, honk if you like the war, but be that as it may. But there were perhaps, dozens of guitars and banjos, and this is the song that people were singing all afternoon. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 I'm gonna shake hands around the world down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna shake hands around the world down by the riverside. Study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 In November 1969, I was just back from 2 years in the Peace Corps. I was in New Haven, Connecticut, and I heard about a moratorium in Washington that was being advertised. Now, I had been in the Philippines from 1967 to 69 when a whole lot of things were happening. These were chaotic years, if you know. And there was no way I was not going to go to Washington to that moratorium. So my wife and I got on an old school bus in Bridgeport, Connecticut, rode through the night to Washington, and went to the demonstration. And Pete was there. And Pete was leading music in the morning, trying to, but he wasn't having any luck with the audience at all. Just people were not relating to the things he was doing. And finally, as he was being motioned to get off the stage so they could stay on schedule, he remembered a refrain that he had picked up the week before from John Lennon, 7 words, and he began to sing it and play it. The words were, "All we are saying is give peace a chance." All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. It went on for about the next half hour. Mitch Miller, who used to do the television show, Sing Along with Mitch, jumped up on stage and began gesturing for people to follow him. Peter, Paul, and Mary got up on stage with Pete, and this was really quite a remarkable kind of thing. I wanted to write about it in my book, and I had to get permission from Columbia Records to do so. They charged me $700 for those 7 words, but I still figured it was necessary and worth it to do. So you can read them if you want to. Pete really wanted to stop the war, and he wrote a song called "Waist Deep in the Big Muddy," and he felt if he could simply sing it anywhere and everywhere, it would stop the war. Pretty naive, but Pete was naive, in fact. And problem was that he sang it at colleges and universities and the like, but he couldn't appear on television because he was being blacklisted because of his radical activities. And then in 1967, Dick and Tommy Smothers, who had a television show, the Smothers Brothers, if you remember, invited Pete to sing. Columbia was sponsoring that. And Pete recorded this song, and when he went to watch the television later, discovered that that song had been cut out. This is in a pre-digital age, of course, and somebody had scissored it out and played the recording without it. And he was furious, and the Smothers Brothers were furious too, and they fought with CBS, and Pete came back to re-record it and did sing it later on, but then Columbia canceled the show. They played it, but the next year it was off the air entirely. Waist Deep in the Big Muddy is about a group of people crossing the Mississippi in 1942. And I'm going to sing the whole song for you. It's got a lot of words, so bear with me. At my age, remembering lyrics is one of the difficulties that we all share. It was back in 1942, was a member of a good platoon. We were on maneuvers in Louisiana one night in the light of the moon. The captain told us to ford a river, that's how it all began. We were knee-deep in the big muddy, but the big fool said to push on. Sergeant said, "Sir, are you sure this is the best way back to the base?" "Sergeant, go on, I forded this river about a mile above this place. It'll be a little soggy, but just keep slogging, we'll soon be on dry ground." We were waist deep in the big muddy, and the big fool said to push on. Sergeant said, "Sir, with all this equipment, no man will be able to swim." "Sergeant, don't be a nervous Nelly," the captain said to him. "All it takes is a little determination, and follow me, I'll push on." We were neck deep in the big muddy, and the big fool said to push on. All at once the moon clouded over, we heard a gurgling cry. A few seconds later the captain's helmet was all that floated by. Sergeant said, "Follow me, men, I'm in charge from now on." And we just made it out of the big muddy with the captain dead and gone. We stripped and dived and found his body stuck in the old quicksand. I guess he hadn't known that the water was deeper, the place he'd once before been. Another stream had joined the big muddy about a half a mile from where we'd been. We were lucky to get out of the big muddy with the captain dead and gone. Well, I'm not one to point any moral, I'll leave that for yourself. Maybe you're still walking, you're still talking, you'd like to keep your health. But every time I read the papers, same old feeling comes on. We're waist deep in the big muddy, and the big fool says to push on. Thank you. Well, eventually the war came to an end, and in the early 1990s, Pete developed another passion. He had read Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, when it came out in 1962. He had been a fan of her book, The Sea Around Us, even before that time. And he was on Cape Cod when somebody took him off in a boat on a lake, and he was really quite taken by that. And he ended up buying a little rowboat that he took out on the Hudson, took his family in it. Then he bought a small sailboat. But the problem was that the Hudson River was awfully polluted. I I mean, there were hunks of raw sewage that went right by you when you were sailing or rowing on the river. And Pete basically wanted to clean it up. And he decided, and this was crazy, that he wanted to build a sloop like one that had sailed the Hudson in the 19th century, 160, 170 feet long, with a big sail. And that was going to help clean the river up. And he began having benefit concerts, invited other people to participate in them, went to shipbuilders who wanted an arm and a leg for building this boat. And finally, he found a man in Bristol, Maine, South Bristol, Maine, named Harvey Gamage. My wife and I go to Maine in the Bristol area every summer. We have for the last 10 years. And we know where Harvey Gamage's shipyard is. And Gamage said he would do it for a very reasonable price. And he did. And they built this boat. And in the latter part of the 1960s, they launched it. And it sailed up the Hudson River. And Mayor John Lindsay was on the boat. And it is still sailing up and down the Hudson River. And there are other clear water, that's the name of the boat, in other parts of the country as well. So this has been a remarkable kind of thing. And Pete wrote a song which he didn't think was very good until he heard some other people singing it. And he said, who wrote that? And they said, you did, Pete. It's called Sailing Down My Golden River. Sailing down my golden river, sun and water all my own, yet I was never alone. Sun and water, old life givers, and death are all my own, and I was not far from home. Sailing down that winding highway, travelers from near and far, and I was never alone. Exploring all the little byways, sighting all the distant stars, and I was not far from home. It's a lovely song. Well, Pete also wrote just a whole bunch of songs that you know that were things that we still sing today that didn't have to do with the civil rights movement or the Hudson or what have you. One of the songs that he liked best of all, a song that he sang pretty much everywhere he went, was written, the words, by a Cuban patriot named Jose Marti, who was killed in 1895 when the Spanish didn't like what he was doing. It was set to music in about 1945 by a composer named Julian Orban, and it was a tune that had been sung to mock the women of Guantanamo who went out with American sailors. Orban had a student who came to Manhattan to study music, and the student went up to Camp Woodland, where he was helping with the young kids, and Pete happened to be there. And that's when he heard this song. It's a song that has been sung worldwide. My wife and I were in Cuba once, and every time we went into a restaurant, they were singing this song. It was kind of neat. And sometimes they would let me take a guitar and play along with them, which was kind of fun too. Guantanamera. The words are in Spanish. It means, I am a simple man, from whence cometh the palm, and before I die, I want to sing the songs of my soul. But the words don't matter. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Y un testimonio me quiero echar mis versos de alma. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Oh, I like that. Another time, Pete's publicist came to him, and he said, Pete, I want you to write a song that we can sell to some other groups so that we can make some money. And Pete said, good idea, I'll be happy to do that. And then the publicist said, but we don't want one of those purposeful songs. And Pete said, well, the hell with you, that's the only kind of song I want to write. But he went home, and he read his Bible, and he came across some verses from Ecclesiastes, and he wrote a simple refrain, one word repeated a number of times, and he sang it, and they sold it to the Byrds, and it became a #1 hit. Turn, turn, turn. My grandson, a couple years ago, was bar mitzvahed in the Jewish faith, and he did an absolutely marvelous job. And he did all the stuff he was supposed to do, and then he read in Hebrew an exceedingly long passage in Ecclesiastes, which included these lyrics. And so at the party that night, we played the song for the 100 people who were there, me on guitar, him on his ukulele, and it was kind of neat. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, time to plant, a time to reap, time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, time to dance, a time to mourn, time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, time to rend, a time to sow, time of love, a time of hate, a time of peace. I swear it's not too late. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time for every purpose under heaven. Pete was traveling once in the Midwest, in either Michigan or Wisconsin, and at a Greasy Spoon, he found an old menu on which was scrawled a poem. And he asked the proprietor who had written that, and the proprietor didn't know. And Pete really made an effort to find out and never could quite discover who it was. So he took it anyway, and he put it to music, and he had a song. And it's a song that's, I think, particularly relevant to us tonight at our collective age. How do I know my youth is all spent? My get up and go has got up and went. But in spite of it all, I'm able to grin and think of the places my get up has been. Sometimes I wonder as I crawl into bed, with my ears in a drawer, my teeth in a cup, my eyes on the table until I wake up. As sleep clouds my vision, I say to myself, is there anything else I should lay on the shelf? But though nations are warring and business is vexed, I'll stick around and see what happens next. I get up each morning and dust off my wits, open the paper and read the obits. If I'm not there, then I know I'm not dead. So I eat a good breakfast and I go back to bed. One more chorus. How do I know my youth is all spent? My get up and go has got up and went. But in spite of it all, I'm able to grin and think of the places my get up has been. Yeah. I want to sing two more songs for you. The first one is a song that Pete wrote when he was depressed, and somehow it was what he did to try to get him out of that funk. It's a lovely song, I think, but even more than that, it was the last song I ever sang with him before he died, and so to me it's kind of important. It's called Quite Early Morning. Don't you know it's darkest before the dawn? But this thought keeps me moving on. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. Some say that mankind won't long endure, but what makes them so doggone sure? I know that you who hear my singing can make these freedom bells go ringing. I know that you who hear my singing can make these freedom bells go ringing. I want to close with a song that Pete didn't write, but probably did more than anybody to popularize. Around about 1940, as the United States was getting ready to go to war, Kate Smith was singing God Bless America over and over every hour on the radio. And Irving Berlin didn't like that. Well, Irving Berlin wrote it, but Woody Guthrie didn't like that. He said, that's not the America that I know. She was singing America the Beautiful. And he wrote a song, This Land Is Your Land, which some people think should be a national anthem. But in any way, join me in several verses of This Land Is Your Land. We'll start with the chorus. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking that ribbon of highway, skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and I rambled and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sand of her diamond desert, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. One more chorus. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out this evening. Hope you enjoyed the presentation we did. And you guys sounded wonderful, great singing. Love it. Have a safe trip home. Hopefully we'll see you again sometime. Thank you.